Special shoutouts to RazorX and Dylan Perez of Nightfall Films for their input on this essay. The dictionary definition of spoil is A, to diminish or destroy the quality or value of, and B, to harm a person's character by being too lenient or indulgent. The definition of spoil when it comes to movies, TV series, books, video games, or any piece of art or entertainment is to reveal very intimate details, usually plot-crucial moments or elements, to anyone who has not yet seen, read, or played said pieces of entertainment, thus hindering other people's anticipation for it. I am all too familiar with this. I have been, for the longest time, one of those spoiler people, not in that I would try to avoid spoilers, but rather that I had no hesitation going into spoilers when I was so eager to share with others a movie that I had loved so much that they hadn't seen, and they had to stop to tell me, hey, don't spoil it for me. It's a phrase that I can recall hearing from my mom as much as hearing, why are you watching this movie? Haven't you already seen it? Now, looking at the two former definitions of spoiler and comparing them to the definition that has been adopted to film and entertainment, I feel strongly compelled to say that we as audiences have become spoiled by this anti-spoiler culture, especially if people think that knowing what's to come in a story ruins or lessens the value of it. After all, the big determining factor as to whether or not a work becomes a classic that makes its mark on and even shapes the media landscape is its rewatchability, replayability, and rereadability. In fact, how well it holds up over time factors into the very dictionary definition of classic. So if something holds up over multiple viewings, then ideally knowing what's to come on the first viewing experience shouldn't lessen the impact if it's done well enough, should it? I feel that this mental obsession over avoiding spoilers has fallen into a similar league as to why the obsession with pointing out cliches has become its own cliche and has been more and more regarded as a form of bad faith criticism in later years. If we can all agree that timelessness is generally what makes films and books and the like great, then that ultimately renders the idea of spoilers moot. But then again, maybe that's a contributing reason as to why many filmgoers seem more than willing to argue that not many films nowadays are great and are just playing it too safe, and why so much of the current entertainment landscape consists of nostalgia bait. In this era of filmmaking that is dominated by franchises, sequels, reboots, and remakes, the topic immediately defaults to, don't ruin the movie for me, I gotta see it for myself, which doesn't really show value for a film as a work of art or something that resonates with someone on an unexpected level, so much as more of an obsession with the sensationalism of it all. With Spiderman No Way Home, while easily a very enjoyable flick that has a lot going for it, and I can fully get the hype and investment for it that made it such a huge hit, people seem so adamant on not having anything ruined for them when they already knew who was getting cameos. Audiences arguably displayed less investment in the characters and story, where the investment is typically supposed to be, that it gets to the point where it's less about spoilers and more about confirmation bias. The big selling point was that Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland were going to unite for the picture, and audiences decided it was already a big cinematic moment for that, and ultimately just wanted to have their opinions validated. That doesn't make for a topic for a film to be discussed as an art form so much as it makes it a point of gossip, especially since a lot more people seem to be more selective about which movies they are obsessed with avoiding spoilers over. People seem to make a bigger deal of that with mega franchises like Star Wars and Marvel than they do, say, musical movies, mainstream animated movies, or other selections. In fact, in the Unusual Suspects video on why movie theaters are garbage, which I made my own video commentary debunking a few years back, he flat out said that the only movies he ever goes to see anymore in the theaters are recent entries from Star Wars and Marvel, all just for the sake of avoiding spoilers on the internet. Now, I don't wish to antagonize anyone or pull a no true Scotsman and declare who is or isn't a true fan of film, but to me, that mentality doesn't sound like real love for film, or at least not really valuing it as an art form. One could argue that it's more a love of entertainment than art, and that's fair, to each his own. And gossip is something that we humans, as social creatures, find entertaining. It's just been a part of us ever since we evolved onto the scene. But history has shown us time and again how it's a double-edged sword, and people who tune into gossip because they don't want to be left out can often be led astray by grifters and exploitators. When you spend your whole time latching on to what other people say, you lose your ability to think for yourself. In Sarah Zed's video, Binge Watching is Kinda Bad, she addresses how when Breaking Bad was initially made to be a binge series, but ultimately got more people watching week by week for the final 2 seasons, as binging mainly helped the show to get people tuning in weekly on other platforms than cable TV. She also brings up how, when streaming really took off, more and more people started tuning into specific shows like Breaking Bad because they wanted to be in on the talk on something that was gaining popularity through word of mouth. And now watchers may have watched Breaking Bad's final 8 episodes weekly rather than on Netflix because they didn't want to wait the time it would take to get to that final season on Netflix and risk getting spoiled. However, this is one instance where it's arguable that knowing what to expect can actually make the viewing experience better, whereas Breaking Bad setups and payoffs arguably are at their best upon their second or third viewing. And let me get this right out there. It's completely understandable to want to go into something with a fresh, unclouded perspective. But if a film is automatically ruined just because you know what's coming, that really only exemplifies, to me at least, more favoring on shock and surprise than actual storytelling. We all know the saying that there are 7 basic story frames that we've seen thousands upon millions of variations over the centuries. Does that mean we should stop storytelling altogether? If you're telling a story about your life and it sounds very similar to someone else's, does that automatically render yours uninteresting? I think there are instances where you can still have a good idea about what's coming in advance without your vision being clouded by it. Maybe not everybody can, but I do firmly believe it's possible, and there are those who are capable of it. It's not unreasonable to go into a film with some form of expectations. Like with anything else you get yourself into, when you plan for a vacation, you pretty much always have some sort of agenda in mind about some interesting sites you can expect to go see when you get there along the way. Like, you go to New York to see the Statue of Liberty, you go to China to see the Great Wall, you go to Australia to see Uluru. Is your experience ruined by seeing pictures in books before seeing them in person? Is it ruined by listening to what others who have gotten to visit those places describe their experiences to you? Isn't knowing what you're getting into supposed to add to the anticipation rather than detract from it? Speaking as someone who has been fortunate enough to travel to many parts of the world, and maybe I'll get around to sharing that sometime in the future, I can testify that experiencing the real thing is 90% of the time largely different from just seeing pictures of it, or just getting an American imitation of it. Because those areas are only able to showcase so much. Just like in film, watching the thing play out for itself is the only true method of getting the sensation. Having a synopsis or a plot-crucial scene explained to you in advance can't fulfill it. Expectations are part of human nature. We're prediction machines. It helps us to build plans and prepare ourselves with the best and worst parts of life. But some also argue that expectation deprives us of all the pleasant feelings in the world. One reason is because we are so reliant on our expectations that what accompanies is the inevitable feeling of being underwhelmed, or even worse, that all your expectations end up blowing up in your face and it's left a negative impact on you for some time. And by the logic of, it sucks if it's predictable, that must mean that any G-rated movie must automatically be bad because you can expect that it will end well for the protagonist. Then again, maybe that's why there are a lot of snobs who look down on family films as inferior forms of cinema. A big reason why spoilers can't give the viewer the true experience may also have to do with the fact that every person interprets something differently. One person may describe how the scene plays out, when watching it for yourself with that person's summation in mind, that you pick up on certain details that give the film a whole new meaning for you. I mean, that is why film analysis and online analysis communities exist in the first place, right? And in any case, it's really a mistake to equate unexpected with revolutionary or timeless. Surprise doesn't always make a film better. There are films out there that have failed to garner the mass appeal that they were hoping for due to lack of cohesion, because the makers put more emphasis on what can we throw at the screen next, rather than how investing is it. If surprise was enough to make a film work, then arguably The Last Jedi would be more universally loved. Or there's that one surprise element in the just-released Lightyear movie that no one saw coming, and in fact, many have been deterred by that decision, and I'm not talking about the uncensored on-screen same-sex marriage. Contrary-wise, with the ever-so-prominent twist villain cliché that has become the subject for so much chagrin among moviegoers, there are some twist reveals that work really well for the setup of a villain, like with Syndrome from The Incredibles, or as I made my own case for in a previous video, Pal the cell phone lady from The Mitchells vs. the Machines, thus proving that expecting something in film does not necessarily ruin it. Revealing certain details in films is also beneficial if there is one or more element or cliche that you're probably not going to like, and being given a heads up on it can help you be prepared for it so that you know when you need to bear through the least desirable parts in order to get to the worthwhile ones. That's just as much a part of entertainment as it is part of life. Moreover, the reason we get invested in the story is because we are invested in the characters whom we are supposed to follow. Now, this might sound weird, but the best way I can put it is by comparing it to throwing a surprise party for a friend, or at least being involved in throwing said surprise party. Sure, you yourself usually know what the surprise is, but the real investment and reward is seeing your friend's reaction to it. Like in a movie, even if you can see what's to come, the big question you're asking is, how is it going to impact the characters? How are they going to react to it? How is it going to affect them and how they grow and change by the end? Maybe that's one reason that people hate spoilers, because they feel it robs them of the experience of becoming the characters. But becoming a character is not the same as being invested in a character and their plight. Sure, there are plenty of off times where we like to envision ourselves swinging over New York City or firing at the Death Star or what have you, but when you are truly invested in a character and connect with them, you're there for more than just their moments that give you that brief adrenaline rush. You're there to follow them on their journey and see how they're transformed by the end. You don't necessarily feel for them in their worst moments because they don't know what's to come, but you do. Again, that's why the whole "it's bad because it's cliche" argument fails. You feel for them because you see the emotions acted/animated through their faces, and the way that the scenes are edited together, it all just immerses you. One excellent case for this is James Cameron's Titanic, which is also an example of how execs can be dismissive of the very premise of a movie based on how predictable it is. The story of how prior to Titanic going on to become the highest grossing movie of its time, it was once considered a folly that everyone was making several jokes about how it was going to be its own disaster, is not unknown. One of the biggest points of contention among executives during Cameron's pitch was, why are we watching a Titanic movie when we know that the ship sinks? But Cameron shot down this question immediately with the saying, if you don't appreciate the ship, then you don't appreciate the sinking. Now, I know there are plenty of people online who said that they were never invested in the movie, they never appreciated the ship, and felt that it was pushed aside in favor of the Jack Rose romance. And it's fine if the film didn't resonate with you personally, but in all honesty, that's not the film's or James Cameron's fault. He accomplished what he had set out to do, as testified by the film's hugely positive response and influence. His was not the first Titanic movie ever made, and was even widely rumored to be a spiritual remake of A Night to Remember from 1958, but it is the first to be made since the discovery of the wreckage of the Titanic, and said discovery allowed for the film to set itself apart in many ways from previous Titanic films, like how the wreckage affirmed the claims of survivors who said that they saw the ship split in two as it sank, as Cameron's was the first film to show. But Cameron further refutes the argument that all suspense was lost in his vision of Titanic, not only by exploring the wreck in the opening scene, but also by giving a CG simulation of the mechanics of Titanic sinking, and this is done deliberately so that the audience isn't lost trying to figure out exactly what's happening during Rose's flashbacks of the sinking, because of the emphasis on the line, how the experience was different from the forensics. And the movie doesn't shy away from foreshadowing the ship's certain doom with elements like the multiple unheeded ice warnings, or the indication that some passengers are definitely going to die, like the frigid water and the shortage of lifeboats. But Cameron has enough faith that this doesn't detract from the impact when disaster does strike. Titanic didn't just stand out amongst other disasters because it was deemed unsinkable and it sank and took down 1,500 plus lives with it. Otherwise, most people today probably wouldn't even bat an eye at it. Titanic symbolized structure and invincibility, and how ultimately precarious the whole illusion of it was. Cameron was very emphatic about this and how it affected other aspects of people's lives at the time, such as matter of gender roles and class based on wealth, and how he wove it into a story with a combination of both fictional and historical characters, so that not only do audiences feel for those who don't survive, not just Jack, but also for those who did survive, like Rose, who were forever changed by the event. And the final topic I would like to address is not only about audiences fixating on what might potentially spoil the story of a film or show for them, but also the illusion, like how knowing the visual effects that a scene is composed of somehow takes you out of the experience. Now, maybe this philosophy applies to me more specifically than others because I'm someone who actually wants to work in the industry at some point in my life, but I think that rather than ruining the illusion by revealing the magic tricks, I have more respect and admiration for the illusion. In The Wizard of Oz, for example, critics at the time were praising the scene of the trees coming to life and threatening Dorothy and the Scarecrow. Today we know it's a puppeteer in a costume thanks to a later critic releasing an article, but the magic was in the suspension of disbelief. Do you think that the movie would still be airing on public television annually if it wasn't? The real magic is about how it connects with you, even after you see everything that went into it and what parts of it stay with you and resonate with you. Good films are entertaining, but great films get you immersed. Not depending on what parts are left secret in advance, but on the execution. And that can't happen if the stock and investment is all contingent on putting predictions and our own personal expectations at the forefront. At the end of the day, the best thing that you can do is try to divorce your expectations from the experience. That may sound hard to do for some, but I wouldn't say that specifically calls for turning your brain off, unless you personally choose to. I think of it more as letting your expectations go once you started the ride, and even if you did the ride once, that's no reason why you can't ride again and relive the experience. And if you're someone who is in the mindset that current films aren't great but you want them to be, then I think dwelling over the matter of spoilers or predictability is one of the first mentalities that needs to be left behind. But of course, this is all my own opinion and speculation. You can feel free to agree or disagree with me in the comments, or even make a commentary on my video here if you have a long list of things to add or debunk. In any case, I look forward to hearing from you all, and I hope that you're all doing well at this time.